one's working.
That works. I forgot how to do this one. Let's see, this is one.
Use the other one. It's not confusing.
Testing? Good, good, good. So first of all, we want to thank you for coming. We love talking about TEDx, so it's always a pleasure. And this is going to be very interactive. What we hope that you're going to want to talk about is finding your voice and creating a TEDx talk, or really any kind of talk that you are trying to plan for that's important. We want to thank Ferguson Library and especially Jason for hosting us. These things, I worked with Jason for a long time, and he always makes things so nice and easy for us. So thank you, Jason. This looks like a journey, like, finding space, because that's how it felt for me. When I did my TEDx talk, it was like going to a different planet. I teach for a living. I teach strategic marketing at Caltech and at Columbia University and with companies like Pfizer all over the world. And I have a book, The Excellent Marketer. But when in 2019 I did my TEDx talk, I tell you, I felt like I was on Mars. It was like, because the environment is different, the expectations are different. You practice and practice and practice some more. So it's just a very different animal. So we're going to share all of the tricks that we learned and answer any of your questions along the way. And then Suzanne and then I was a coach and a judge, and that's where I helped other TEDx speakers, and I was lucky because Suzanne, my dear friend, was one of the speakers recently.
I was going to say, I'm surprised Mary still wants to talk with me, because she's been so gracious and kind as we were going through the whole TEDx process. We'd go for walks, and as we'll get into it, you'll see it's really, I've been in the industry for 35 plus years doing what I do, and being able to hone into one core thread to make it work and simplistic. And you'll see as we get into it, you have to nail it so hard because you have maximum 18 minutes. And we'll get into it in a bit, but I would beg to say that you're actually better off if you can get it done in about 10 to 12. So, and we'll move on to that part as we get going. It was an exciting journey. I did mine this past year. And if it's something people want to get involved in, highly recommend you reaching out to either one of us, and we can help you with some of the process as well.
Yeah, and Jason says he's going to have another TEDx talk. So just a little bit more background on TEDx talk here at Ferguson Library. They've been doing it since 2018. So they've hosted 4 TEDx talks now. And the vision is to create a community. And so one of the things was Allison had said, we'd like to have a group of speakers. And so we created what's called the Pro Speaker Group. And it's for people that get paid, or hopefully get paid, to speak. And it's about 20 professional people that get together once a month and talk about how to build their speaking business. Welcome. And so that's one of the things that the Ferguson Library is really trying to develop. Every time they have the talk, there is a topic that you have to fit. And that's part of the judging is how well does this talk fit the topic. So mine was community. And I teach marketing. I love segmentation. My whole thing is about helping companies grow. And so for me, I was like, how am I going to fit this in? And that was part of the magic is to take something and then fit it in, if it's appropriate, into that topic. And then Suzanne, yours was?
Renewal. And mine was really getting people to think differently and renew their vision of really what insurance is. Instead of the big hairy monster, actually physically understand how it affects your life and makes it much better. People don't understand the undercore process of holding. And you think renewal, maybe it's renewable energy, renewable whatever, but one of the things is to figure out, we had a variety of different topics, just like Mary and her cohort had a variety of different topics that fit the theme of whatever they presented. So mine was renewal, yours was community,
yeah.
and it made a huge difference when you put the whole core piece of it together.
What were some of the talks were the IEP process for school and the renewal of how to have teachers talk to parents. Medical, we had a couple of medical
people, and obviously insurance. One was about mental health. It was a variety of different topics, so you can see that they thought renewal was different. and the way they presented and the themes of their speeches.
Yeah. So our agenda for tonight is, and we have some special guests, by the way. Suzanne's parents are in the back. Hello. Thank you for coming. And then my daughter and Jose. And what is your name? Oh, Austin. Welcome. Glad you're here. Our agenda tonight is to talk about why you're here, what you want to know, and then talk about why you would do a TEDx talk. Scoping and shaping are two huge things. To scope your talk is to try to figure out of this amoeba what I'm going to actually talk about. And then the shaping is all of it that comes to life. And by the way, all of these slides we'll be more than happy to give to you. If you can take pictures of it and send us an email, or just somehow let us know, and we will send all of this to you. And it has links. It has a lot of links in it. But delivering is the last thing that we'll talk about. And along the way, these topics will share all of the things that worked and didn't work. But first, why are you here? Are there any people here that are professional speakers other than Rohan? You're a professional speaker, right? You're learning to be? Anyone else professional speaker? Hunter? No? Okay. How about you're part of a speaker group? Okay. You are considering doing a TEDx talk? Okay. Say your name again, please. Crystal, talk a little bit about why you want to do a TEDx talk.
Put me on the spot. Hey, okay. I want to do a TEDx talk because I saw someone who did it, and it was phenomenal. She was an educator. I work in the public school system, and I really dug what she said, and I dug the way she said it. And I come from a theater background. I am a storyteller, so I'm very interested to see how I can lend my talents into the delivery of it. So it just seems like a natural kind of evolution. I'm already a storyteller, and public speaking doesn't always have to be, because I've seen many a TED Talk, and there are an array of different styles that people have. So that's really why I wanted to do it. I think I have a couple of great messages for the planet, so I'm hoping that that will be another vehicle in which I could do it.
I don't know what you're going to talk about, Crystal, but Jason, I think we already have our first one. I don't know how to turn this on. Is this, maybe you can, Suzanne, did you figure out how to turn this on?
What's that? That one, Mayor? Oh, there we go. Now, does anybody else have any other reasons they want to be here?
Thank you, Crystal.
And then the other one is there anything specific anybody wants to learn about tonight?
Thank you.
I think my journey has a message. My one's life journey has a message, and so more than speaking, I think TEDx is a platform where I could bring forth that message, which could be useful for people in their own journey of their life. That is what attracted me to TEDx as a platform.
I like that. I think that for me, that was kind of that deeper feeling of what can I do? First, do I have anything that's worth telling the planet? And so that's a kind of a test as you're going through it. And then once you start to put it together, you're like, ooh, will this resonate with people that I'm sharing my ideas with? Why did you do your TEDx talk?
Because I think insurance is that valuable. I really do. And instead of it being that evil, hairy monster that's just the bill you pay every day, people don't realize how critical it really is to the economy. And, if you listen to my TEDx talk, I'll use Hurricane Irene as a perfect example, or Andrew. When in Miami you have thousands of homes that are destroyed, and who's the first financial responder that appears? The person who's giving you the money to rebuild your houses is the insurance. Okay, even a perfect example, I just broke my leg. Grateful for insurance, because it would have been a massive disaster financially to my household. So it just, instead of life becoming disasters, they become speed bumps. And I thought that's an important message.
And actually, I know now more about insurance than I ever thought I did. And So we have some new people that have joined us. Welcome. We're glad you're here. What is your name? Marty and Nora. Welcome. We're glad you're here. We're obviously asking a lot of questions, and hopefully everyone's going to share their thoughts. Any other reasons that you are here or things that you want to make sure we cover tonight? Yes, please. Yes, thank you.
Be a better public speaker.
Well, let me ask you this. So you want to be a better public speaker. What types of things do you want to talk about, or why is that?
I want to go into politics.
Ooh.
Yes, very smart. That in fact, because that's one of the key skills that a good politician has, right? How good are you now? Are you pretty good? Oh, good. Okay, all right. Well, this is perfect because we have actually had. Good. We're going to keep going through, but you make sure that we're answering your questions along the way. Suzanne, anything else?
I just want to say that this is meant to be interactive, so please, if there is questions along the way, please let us know. Yes, Diane.
I'm here because I am soon to be an empty nester and need to recreate the next phase of my life. So I am looking for skills and strengths in presenting myself because who I am is much stronger than who I am on paper. So I want to learn some of the power that goes into that.
Well said.
That is really well said, and it's kind of a collection of things. Like I said, I do speaking, I have a book, but it feels like the other piece of the puzzle is doing a talk, and none of them in themselves, but when you start to put them together, it helps, especially if you're trying to build some kind of a speaker reputation or some kind of a career where you're asking people to hire you. You want to have them trust you. So let's, I'm going to move on unless you have anything else here. So Suzanne, we're going to make sure that we're talking about sharing the message, leaving a message.
Leave a message with the, so we have sharing the message of education and leaving a message with the planet. Rohan talked about his life's journey. He thinks it's a great message to share. I'm sorry I didn't write your name down. Austin. Austin wants to be a better public speaker because he wants to get involved in politics. And Diana wants to develop skills and strengths for the next phase and share her message of how great she is beyond just the paper.
Good. So we're going to talk about scoping a little bit now. And this is where our walks together with Suzanne, she'd call and she'd say, okay, I'm ready again. I'm like, okay. And so she says, I got it this time. And so we would go on a walk and she would tell me her talk, and it was completely different than the day before. Like, oh, okay. So how many talks did you end up that you actually had?
Wow. So here's something I'm passionate about, and I'm involved in sales of insurance for a living. I really love it. I think it's an important message to share. And through the journey of life, we all have stories that we learn along the way. So poor Mary was gracious enough to probably listen to about 15 to 20 different stories. And how do you weave the message that it's impactful without overwhelm? I could talk about life insurance and the people I've known who've life without it and life with it. I had one of my dear friends who passed away and her husband left her. And because of the situation of his passing, it was a murder, it took a while for the payout to come. And as they're coming to my office and they're saying, hey, mortgage is asking for us. And okay, well, my son's dropping out of school so we can take over daddy's business. And I'll never forget the day. Look at me again.
I need some Kleenex for you.
No, I'm good. She shows up and it's like, I'm sitting there and I say, okay, well, here you go. We have $300,000. And she sits back aghast like, and I'm, okay, we'll work it out. And she's like, it's twice what I expected. It's twice what I expected. Her son was able to go back to school. The house was fine. It was just such a stark contrast of what would have been and what became.
So when you're doing a TEDx talk, it's really tricky because I was listening to Suzanne's stories and there's some really hard stories. Somebody gets killed, and so you want to balance that that emotion of some of the, the really tough things, but then also some of the lighter things. And so,
And that one didn't make the talk.
it did make the talk, but it came through a couple of times. But it's a lot of stuff gets on the cutting floor as you're doing that. But filling out, how emotional do you want people to feel, and how do you take them on the roller coaster?
And to this degree, Mary and I were talking about this. It's TEDx is about ideas worth spreading. It's not a sales pitch, right? And so part of the reason I took that story out was because I felt it was too much of a sales pitch. Is it valuable to understand that? 100%. But we're not here to sell. We're here to have people understand about what we're talking about, okay? Mary's asking about how many talks do you really have? You poor thing. I went through about 15 different versions of it. But you do. You have 18 minutes maximum. And what's the balance between losing somebody with overwhelm and too much information, leaving them with just enough to want more, or being too brief? So that's the balance we have to figure out.
Yeah, because it is like a calling card. If it's short enough, if it's less than 10 minutes, more people are going to want to share it and see it. Suzanne's was brilliant because yours ended up being
7 minutes and 59 seconds.
and mine was 14 and a half, still under the 18, but I think mine was too long. I had one too many stories, I think. And the saying is if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. If I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. That's what it's like. Suzanne's was actually brilliant because she was able to take and get her message very clear with really good examples in like less than 10 minutes. So that's the trick. If there's one of the tricks, that's one of the big tricks. I'm going to show you one of the talks because as you're scoping, it sounds like a lot of you have watched a lot of TEDx and TED Talks. That helps give you ideas about what you're going to actually scope, how you're going to scope it. So here's an example of one of my favorites. I like the way he starts, and I like some of the balance of his story in here. His name is Tim Urban, and it's Inside the Mastermind of a Master Procrastinator.
College, I was a government major, which means I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. So, you get started maybe a little slowly, but you get enough done in the first week that with some heavier days later on, everything gets done and things stay civil. And I would want to do that like that. That would be the plan. I would have it all ready to go, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. And that would happen every single paper. But then came my 90-page senior thesis, a paper you're supposed to spend a year on. I knew for a paper like that, my normal workflow was not an option. It was way too big a project. So I planned things out, and I decided I kind of had to go something like this. This is how the year would go. So I'd start off light, and I'd bump it up in the middle months. And then at the end, I would kick it up into high gear. It's just like a little staircase. How hard could it be to just walk up the stairs? No big deal, right? But then, funniest thing happened. Those first few months, they came and went, and I couldn't quite do stuff. So we had an awesome new revised plan. But then those middle months actually went by, and I didn't really write words. And so we were here. And then 2 months turned into 1 month, which turned into 2 weeks. And one day I woke up with 3 days until the deadline, still not having written a word. And so I did the only thing I could. I wrote 90 pages over 72 hours, pulling not one, but 2 all-nighters. Humans are not supposed to pull 2 all-nighters. Sprinted across campus, dove in slow motion, and got it in just at the deadline. I thought that was the end of everything. But a week later, I get a call. It's the school. And they say, "Is this Tim Urban?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "We need to talk about your thesis." And I say, "Okay." And they say, "Is the best one we've ever seen. That did not happen. It was a very
So I'm curious. I'm curious what you guys think. What worked and what didn't work with old Tim here? What do you guys think? Sophia, I'm going to ask you one. Just help me out a little bit. What worked?
I don't. Let me think. I'd have to say. I think the visuals of it worked. Yeah.
Great call.
I so agree with you. Austin, anything to add?
He sort of led you down a trail, and like you arrived at the destination.
Yeah. He's, storytelling has, now it's like, oh, you have to do storytelling. But that's what he did. He brought us into a great story, right? And pulled us in with a personal experience without a lot of heavy data, but enough that you're like, oh, you're following along. And that's the trick, is to get the visuals working for you to help you with your story.
And he brought in levity, which got the audience involved right away. He enjoyed and had, obviously you can hear from the laughter, the audience participation. He brought them in immediately, which is energizing for him and for the crowd that was there.
Did you notice he had no notes? You don't have notes during a TEDx talk.
I also noticed that he started with the general, and this is what most people would do, and then brought it to his specific situation. And everybody wants to pull for an underdog, so when he starts to make himself look like, I'm not doing it the way you expect, now we've got tension.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We actually had one speaker that was creating tension, and it was so much tension that it was burning us all out. She lost, and so we finally just said stop, because it was too much. So you're right. So so you have to find that balance of how much tension works. What else were you going to say?
No, I said that it hits overwhelm, and you can either start with individualized stories or general stories and bring them in, but we're going to get into probably the next slide where you talk about a core thread, and if you get a theme that radiates all the way through, it makes a huge difference. So as we're talking about shaping, we're tying in the elements from the beginning to the end, and if you watched all of his TED Talk, you'll see how it does tie through. Now, the process of building a TED Talk is daunting and overwhelming, to say the least. As Mary and I talked about, it was probably 4 months of walks and talks, and
It was actually 6 months from when we selected the speakers to when you did it. It was 6 months. It's crazy. It looked like, that's why I like that procrastination thing too. I tell everyone to see it, because the TEDx talk feels like, oh, I'll get to it in a couple months, and then all of a sudden it's time to do it. So
100%, and I followed in that path a little bit. But even for using data as an examples of, so he used graphs, right? Mary, you chose to use graphs. I didn't use any. I used data, and it came throughout my TED Talk, and maybe perhaps I should have had a couple slides. And in fact, one of the things is this is one of the few talks in your entire life that you will not have any notes with you. No index cards, no, you're giving the best man speech at the wedding, you have your thing to go upon. Unless the reality is, if you have slides that are going to be part of this, those can be used as your triggers to keep you on track for where you are. Could I have used some data in my slides? Probably. Probably would have made sense to pull it in a couple spots. I chose not to. I'm not sure one was right or wrong, but I would also say that it's critical that you don't put an overwhelm of slides. We've seen some speakers who had too many, or some speakers where it should have ended 3 minutes earlier. There's things that go through the entire process. And the other thing is that I think that as we go through these TED Talks, and Mary and I were talking about this, remember, this is about ideas worth spreading. So it really isn't about just you, is it? It's about the global audience. Now, this gentleman's bringing it in, Tim is bringing him to himself, talking about how his pathway through procrastination, but he talked about we as an audience in general. And we've listened to some of the early speeches. Well, I did this and I did that and I did this and I did that and I did this and I did that. And it's like, whoa, okay. Is this speech about you or is it about an idea worth spreading? So as you're coming up with your own speech, whether it's a professional speaker, maybe it's even just giving a speech. Again, we were talking about a best man speech or a best woman speech at a wedding. Who's the audience for? Is it about the bride and groom or is it about you? As we're giving out these TEDx talks, is it just for you? The TEDx talk lends credibility to your profession. It lends credibility to what you want to get out there. I'm sure as a teacher, you're not sitting here going, well, I want only this and I want, no, you want your students to get this, right? It's a big message that we want to share with everyone.
And Austin, I really like that you're thinking about it from a political standpoint too, because I've seen some of our politicians like put the room to sleep, and then there's other ones that just make you're just like, where can I give you money? Right? And so there are differences as they really start to appeal to instead of I did this and then I did that, but more pulling us in. So that's probably a really good thing that I see in a lot of effective speeches. I'm going to play your speech for a minute. Do you want to give it any preference? I mean, anything before I?
Well, okay, so I'll just talk about this slide real quick before we move into it, Mary. Moving things around, the power of index cards. So I just want you to realize the speech that I did, poor Mary again went through about 15 renditions. You have to find a technique that works for you to put it all together. So when I was practicing at home, I joined Toastmasters. I thought it was phenomenal. The feedback was incredible, the people that were involved. And they have this tool called Udily. And it was perfect because you can actually record yourself. It actually tracks your speech. And it tells me how many I've done. It tells me if I'm going really fast and I want to have my speech go out and, if I'm talking like this, boy, I'll have a 7-minute TED Talk, right? Or do I want a 120-minute TED Talk? So I found it really invaluable tool to use. So if you can't have just feedback from friends and family, or you think you're doing something one way, this was a phenomenal way to do it. The TED Talk that you're going to see, I had probably 40 or 50 index cards that were in a way, and I had it organized this way, and it didn't flow for me. So then I had to move it here. Or my data point made sense, but didn't let me segue to the right way. So that was the path that I used. You used something different. You were on slides, correct?
I did a lot of PowerPoint slides to start to get my chunks, and then I printed out. I actually wrote it out, and I record it myself about 1 million times on my computer. And I just hit record, and I would at different times of the day see how I feel, and I would then play it back, which was painful, and I go, oh, that doesn't make any sense there. So it makes sense to keep playing it over and over. And I just actually dumped a bunch of my slides finally that I kept holding on to and moving around. But that Udily, I hadn't heard of that before, and it really is phenomenal. It's technology at its best. So if you are going to be a public speaker at all, get your hands on that. That's
100%.
That was really smart. And Toastmasters, we don't have them here tonight, but that was the first thing you did. I mean, you immediately signed up with them.
And actually, in part of it, it was funny because one of my coaches, if you will, at Toastmasters, so we got offline and, well, not actually more online. We got offline of the meeting, but we went to a Zoom call. And she said, all right, girlie, time out. You're sounding so boring and technical. This isn't the Suzanne that I know. And she came up with some really grand, bodacious ideas that made it, like, instead of dry talk and insurance stuff, like, be exciting. Have something that's more interesting. And so it really helped me get through some of the techies, if you will.
So here's the video. Let me see if I can. Here's Suzanne's talk. Even your title was tricky, right?
Yes.
I'll play it and then you can talk a little bit about that.
It was 2 a.m. on October 22nd when the phone rang. And I don't know what happens to you when the phone rings at 2 a.m., but 2 things happen for me. First, my heart sinks, and then I answer it. It's My son on the other end of the line. Hey, bud, what's up? Mom, I just messed up. I think I just totaled Dad's car. Sure enough, he did. Fast forward, I won't go into the details, but we're in the wee hours of the morning sitting at the kitchen counter, and my son's sitting there and go, okay, first of all, how am I going to tell my father what I just did? And B, how am I going to pay for this? And you could see the angst in his face as he's going, okay, I've got some money saved up already. I know I'll just delay going to school. I can take a semester off of college. It's not a problem. And as a mother, I let him sweat that out a little bit longer before I let him in on the secret. Buddy, we have insurance. Yeah, so? Now that's almost comical, because what have I been doing my entire life? I've been an insurance professional my entire life. And he's trying to think, well, yeah, so what does that mean to me? And at that moment, it really meant everything. Because I went through a few minutes of the early morning mechanics of insurance and how it works. He goes, wait a minute. You mean I don't have to deplete my savings account and I can go off to school the way I planned? I said, yeah, bud, that's exactly what it means. You only have to pay your father the $500 deductible and figure out how you're going to tell him. Now, it brought me to another 2 a.m. wake-up call, and it was my friend Jeff.
Okay, there. So you got a couple of your themes in there now. So Suzanne, talk about the themes and how you were building that in, please.
So I use the power of two a lot. You'll see in a bunch of my 2 a.m. or 2 something or other calls. And it was just to be able to bring some of the storylines together. And it took a lot. It took some coaching. It took some help to be able to figure out how to make all this work. And then the other thing that was interesting is, how do you weave into there the expertise of what you do, right? Without saying, oh, well, I'm so great.
Or I'm an insurance agent, hire me, right?
Correct.
Because you want to slip it in, but you can't. If you do that, they'll pull your talk. So you can't. You
not
can't
to be
do that.
selling.
Yeah.
So the subtlety of being able to say, it's almost comical that my son doesn't get this because what I've been doing my entire life, right? It's the subtlety of being able to say, hey, yes, I am the expert in this field, and present what you're doing without getting your TED Talk pulled because you're selling.
And opening up with some kind of a question or something that makes it compelling for people. You know, Suzanne's story, it has attention. You know, you're like, oh man, and everyone can, especially if you're a mom, you totally relate to that. So, so I think that you pulled him in, and then you were on with your story. And there was the bright side that your son gets to go on and live his life. So, it had a balance to it. Welcome. We're glad you're here. What is your name? Hi, Mara. It's nice to see you. And your name? Alexandra. Welcome. We're just going through, but if you have any questions along the way, please ask.
Mary, let's hear yours.
Okay. So mine, I would try to come up with a question for mine, and let's see here. What if I was to tell you that you could grow your community by not talking to some people? So let's first talk about what community is, right? Usually it's a geographic area where people work and live. And while this is one definition, it's not the only definition, right? A broader definition could be this. It could be a group of people with a common set of needs, attitudes, behaviors, right? When you think about it this way, it transcends cities, countries. It's global, right? It's like global community. Now, organizations know that they need to foster communities, but what they might not know is that there's a key to growing. So, over the last 25 plus years that I've been working with very different companies around the world, there is one thing that I've seen. The successful companies treat different customers different. They treat different customers different. And
Notice how Mary interjects her level of expertise subtly there again?
Very subtle. Let's see if I can get this to work. There.
Now,
Okay,
here's
good.
also an example of using slides again. Mary did a fabulous job with her slides, and if you watch her entire presentation, it's light use of slides. It's not inundative. We had some more analytical professionals come in with an overuse of slides, in our opinion. And everybody hears them and feels them differently. But as you build whatever speaking networks you're going to do, make sure your slides are not overwhelmed, but rather an enhancement or add value to what you're trying to do.
Or prompts. The first set of speakers was, there was a tennis pro, and he was talking about the power of the mind, and he just had a tennis racket and a ball. And he was showing how, if you use your mind on that. So sometimes just having a prompt or two up there is also very effective. But as you can see, it's you up there, and you may or may not get the audience to give you any interaction. I have questions in there, and I had to make up that people were actually responding to me. Like, does anyone have a big dog, a medium dog, a small dog? And you just have to fake it because you don't really see anyone. The lights are so bright in your eyes that you just keep going. But if you're teaching, like when you speak normally, Rohan, you have that energy of that audience, and you get to ask people questions, but you don't really get to do it as much here. So I think for me, that was one of the hardest things about doing this kind of a speech. The resources, like I said, you can take a picture of this, and or we'll send this whole deck, but this is probably one of the most important slides. These books helped. I love Talk Like TED, and the library has this for you to check out. So if you are interested, it is probably one of my favorites. Talk Like TED is good. And then there's other resources here too that you would probably want to check out at some point. What questions do you have so far? Any questions, comments? Are we answering your questions? Yeah? Hunter, question? No? Good. All right. Oh, Mr. Malloy.
When's the next time you're having a presentation of TED Talks? Yeah, when is the next time for TED Talk presentations?
So what is it? Spring? Okay.
Spring. Okay, spring 2024?
But to your point, thank you for your question, because to do that, though, we start recruiting people in
September,
October. Yeah, and usually what happens is that it goes out, and the topic gets announced, and then you can apply. And to apply, there's a couple of things that you need to have. One is a speaker reel or something. Like, we're just trying to make sure people can talk. So we would ask that even if you went in your backyard, Suzanne, I think you were on your boat or something.
I was on well, actually, it's funny. So I was on the boat, and actually, again, didn't make it to my TED Talk, but I was talking about how the impact of insurance actually makes an impact on the environment. And it's a silly little thing, but so, for example, something called underground storage tanks, or everybody used to have their oil tank in the ground. Well, we stopped insuring them and made it more difficult. So eventually a lot of these things came up, and look how much better our drinking water is, and look how much better the sound is. And there are some trends and things that insurance can affect. Now, see, here I am giving my little thing on a phone on the boat talking about the water and the clarity of the water, which didn't even make it into my TED Talk, but they understood that I could speak.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that we'll be looking for anyone that applies. You want to have a short description of like the gist of what your talk is. Obviously, it's going to take you a while to actually create what you're going to talk about, but what's that one line that is relevant for people to go, okay, that probably makes sense, and then why are you an expert at it versus somebody else? And so those are some of the criteria that we used, but people came from different, one woman was from Tahoe, so you don't have to live here to apply, and you don't have to live wherever else you might apply for one of the talks. It can be anywhere. And there's a resource in here on the next slide.
Mary, we're talking about time frames too. That video had to be a minute or less.
Yeah.
And then we also had South Carolina, I think, join us. A couple different locations. So.
Yeah, and so we picked 9 typically, 9 speakers, but there was a big field of people that applied. So It's a little bit tricky. This is about delivering. You want to talk a little bit about the delivering?
So again, we talked throughout this thing that there are no notes. So if you need notes or something to carry you through, it is slides. I did mine without any. Now, fortunately, I don't even think we put it on here. Oh, it'll be on here. Clothing, okay. Let's look at the videos that you just saw there with Mary and myself. I wore dark clothing. Mary wore bright pink. Who showed up better? By far. By far. No, absolutely. And so, you know, look at the dry runs when you do it. Look at unfortunately, we didn't have the screens to be able to watch it in the dry runs. But had I done it over, definitely, I think it would be nice to be in a brighter color. So those are things that come in.
The stage is dark, so you forget how you are in that context. But if you watch TEDx talks, you're going to start to notice these things, like what clothes did they wear, and you're going to have to wear
clips.
You're going to have to wear something like this. Wouldn't be good because I don't have any place to put a clip. So some of those logistics.
And even the pattern might not be great on video. That's what we have to look at too.
Right. This would not be a good thing for video. Any kind of pattern, more solids are good.
So one of the other pieces that happened with this thing, so I walk up on stage, and fortunately Jason and team told us, because I go, well, it was 10 a.m. That had nothing to do with my speech and totally threw me off. And thank God they had said to us, guess what? Take pauses. We're going to be able to edit. We'll restart. So I just went back and I said, okay, I'm sorry. Give me one moment. And I did the next couple steps again, and I said, okay. It was 2 a.m. when I got that phone call. Because can you imagine if I had to do that whole script over with just 10 a.m.? It just blew off the entire thing. But we'll also talk about, if you do a TED Talk, you do want the momentary pauses so that they can edit. Because I'm talking like this, how are they going to be able to edit my speech? It's really going to be difficult for them to find a spot to get in there, right? The other thing we do, and again, I mentioned earlier, we don't want to be so slow that people tune out right away. So have the intentional pauses. If for nothing else, if you're being recorded, they can take the breaks where they need to. It's impact when you take a breath and let something sink in. Is the audience connecting? Again, it's hard to figure out when you're in the dark, but those little, oh, good, mama let her son figure it out for a few minutes and let him sweat it. You heard a little bit of a laugh there. It makes a difference. The TED Talk we looked at first, obviously that's a brighter stage and a bigger audience and there's more interaction. But the TEDx is much smaller. But these are techniques of public speaking that everybody wants to learn, especially if we're going to become politicians. As teachers, you know the value of intentional pauses. Let it sink in where it comes in. Movement, that was the other thing. If I was pacing back and forth on the stage, what are you going to be looking at? Okay, what's going on with this girl, right? So with ours, we actually had a very tight window. It's like, okay, if you go out of here, you're out of frame, and if you go out of here, you're out of frame. You want a little bit of movement, because if I'm having my entire speech like this, then I look like a statue. Mary was great. A couple hand gestures talking about things. So these are part of all little subtleties that go into the entire speeches that we want to work on together collectively to make a difference.
Yeah, one thing about the pause, one of the speakers recently was in the middle of it and then just froze. And then she walked over here and she got her head back in what she was doing, but it was hard for them to edit it because she had moved so much. So if you freeze, just freeze there for a second, get your head back in the game, and then start from kind of where you are, because it's easier to edit some of those things than if you go to the other end of the stage and have to do it again.
Yeah, mine worked only because I was starting over.
Yeah, that is true.
But
yeah.
it's 100% correct. You have to stop.
Jason, I'm going to ask you, is there any other things that, like for editing or things that you found with the speakers?
Generally speaking, the best advice is take your time, and if you like you said, if you make a mistake, don't run across the stage and adjust your hair and then say the next line, because it's going to be pretty obvious. But the best thing is to tell everybody, you know, if you screw up, it doesn't really matter. Most of the people who see this are going to see it after we take out all your mistakes. So don't bother getting flustered. Yeah, it takes a lot of pressure off, I think.
Thanks, thank you.
That actually took a lot of pressure off for me.
Yeah, and at the beginning, when we first started doing TEDx talks, it wasn't that easy. Like the sound wasn't working, and there was some things that the bugs got worked out. And I think you re-recorded one of them just because it was really, I mean, really, there's nothing in life that is permanent like that. So you can always redo it if it really, 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 really is bad. You guys encourage us not to, but that it's nice to know if you need to. Crystal, you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, I had a question. So, do you rehearse here?
Yes.
Like, is it one day where you just tape, or is it like a day that you rehearse? How does that work?
So great question. We had a very dry run with our speakers the first day, a week in advance. In fact, I delivered a speech completely different than what I ended up with. It was 2 weeks in advance, and we had the stage out, but it was just a couple of people in the audience, no tech, no nothing. The day before, we came in on Friday night for mic checks. Not really so much lighting, but the mic check to see how it would work for you. And then obviously the day of itself, excuse me. So largely you're on your own, and you have to create your own network of people to do this with. I ended up connecting with a couple of the other speakers, and we did a few Zoom calls back and forth where we took turns practicing our speeches, and we honed in and we cut and we tweaked the segue. But the speeches were largely dialed in because, as Mary would say, pencils down, 2 weeks before, pencils down. You have to get it down as much as possible. So the answer is yes and no.
Is it taped in front of an audience or
Oh,
no?
yes.
Oh, it is.
Tim was here with us. Sophia was here with us. Mom and Dad were here with us. Diane, I think you maybe weren't no? Okay. So, yeah, no, it's a live audience. Most of the auditorium was full of people who were joining us, which was really quite exciting, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is really fun. It is fun.
And the Ferguson does an amazing job of making this facility available for us. People like Jason, Alice, we are so blessed with the resources. Stanford's such an amazing city with so many great resources, so many people, and the depth of talent that they make available to us, it's incredible. And we're grateful to have this right here in our backyard. So thank you to everybody who makes this happen.
Yeah, yes, please, Ron.
So Mary and Suzanne, with regards to the topic, how broad or general are they when they are floated? And how does the process of narrowing them down to a specific title, like the ones that you showed and delivered? Would be good to have an idea of certain examples around them.
So, as I understand your question is, the first one is who presents the topics for the TEDx Speak itself? And that would be part of the committee. And then you have to decide if that would fit. Whatever speech you want to give is going to fit whatever their term is. Now, community can mean a lot of different things, right? Mary chose to talk about a community in terms of marketing and segmentation and how it makes a huge difference when you know who your community is. Now, healthcare might talk about community differently. A school teacher would talk about a community completely differently. So really, you have to understand for you what your topic is, and is that going to tie in? I originally thought, renewable, I don't know if I should apply. What's renewal really mean? Like, okay, renewable resources, renewable energy. And in speaking with Mary, she's like, well, no, it's about also maybe renewing your thinking. And I must say, I think a lot of it did really, the speeches that we did during our TED Talk, it was about renewed thinking. Maybe we need to reinvent healthcare and think about how healthcare is changing. Right? How words matter was another one who spoke about it. So let's rethink how we use our words because it affects our behaviors. Another one came out about the parent-teacher relationship, and we need to rethink how we advocate for kids. So it can change to what you're talking about. Did I answer your whole question, or is there
Absolutely,
something
absolutely.
else?
In the beginning too, is it just can be a gist of what your idea is going to be. It has to be clear enough that the committee can say, okay, that sounds like it might be interesting and something we haven't heard from somebody else. But there is no expectation that the talk is prepared when you go to submit your application. It's that we know that that's part of the process to refine it. But you know, you want to have some kind of hook in there that they go, oh, this Rowan has something that no one else has thought about before, or it's a unique look at something.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions or comments or thoughts or?
No.
So did we
So,
get
oh,
to?
I want to tell you, so that the location, you can obviously just, when you go to TED.com, there is all the events, and it's an easy find. You can go in and search for the type of location and the type of talk. So if you're at all interested, it's very easy to find a whole set of them. And you'll apply, and I have a friend that's applied at probably 25, and he's done 3. So it's kind of timing and luck a little bit. But so those are all of the things that we had. Yeah, let's go back here
So
now.
Crystal, did we answer part of your sharing the message and leaving a message with the planet? Did we cover enough that you're comfortable with that? Okay. Rohan, about a life's journey.
Totally, totally.
Great. Austin, you talked about becoming a better public speaker because of politics. I got a thumbs up over here. Okay, great. And then Diana, developing skills and strengths so people can see you beyond paper. Were we able to help you with any of that stuff? Great. You have me at Suzanne at Malloy Insurance, INS for insurance .com, and Mary at, M. Abazia at impactplan.com. You have our emails there. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us if there's something we can do to assist you and point you in the right direction. So.
We're on LinkedIn too, so of course, just send us a message. We love talking about this. So anytime in your career you say, remember 3 years ago you were doing, we will talk to you about it, because I think it's an important thing for you, whenever you're ready for it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we're around if you want to ask more questions, but thank you.
Thank you.